Hi, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Just Crunch It. Today with us, we have Chris Byington, who is the head of analytics at Superhuman. Previously, Chris has led data teams at orgs like Updater, Heroku, Analysis Group, amongst others. And personally, for me, Chris had a lot of ideas about what we could talk about in this show when I shared that, hey, it is all going to be about data. He's heading the analytics at Superhuman, and Superhuman as a product is a very darling product, something that is close to a lot of us. So, of course, I'm super excited. And I had a lot of fun planning this because we have a lot and a lot to talk about. I'm going to jump straight into it without further delay. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for helping so much with the planning and everything that we did. Chris, I would usually go about asking about, hey, give a background of what you do and what you don't do. But I think Superhuman needs no introduction. And with that, I actually want to ask you a very tough question. So it looks like you have moved into Superhuman recently, right? And Superhuman as a product is exceptional. It delivers that value where
Agreed. Yeah.
the experience is phenomenal. You will see it all across. It serves as an inspiration for a lot of builders out there. And I remember us jamming on how you actually make that happen, because on the backside of it, I can imagine Rahul, you and the team just sitting and crunching a lot of insights, some of which might be subjective, some of which might be like volume based quantitative. And could you just give us a walkthrough of how does that qualitative and quantitative data merge into delivering the kind of experience that Superhuman does?
Sure. I think you're right. That is a tough question. I think to start with, but kind of before you talk about qual and quan and prioritizing features and everything about like that, it really needs to start with having a ton of clarity within the company about like what your goals are and what your values are. I think if you don't have that, then you're kind of lost at sea trying to pick individual features, but you don't really have a direction to row in. And so for Superhuman, as I think is probably quite obvious, we are a design-led company, which to me means it's kind of the purest expression of prioritizing the end user experience, potentially above, kind of financial business performance, although I haven't really seen that trade-off happen here necessarily. Like you can have both. When you build an amazing product, I think the users and the revenue comes kind of as exhaust. That's my philosophy. And having a
Yeah.
really, and so that's the first thing. And then having a really strong opinion about what that kind of core experience should look like. And I think products that are opinionated, they may serve a slightly narrower set of users, but I think they solve a dramatically deeper problem for them within the data world. I think the obvious example that comes to mind is DBT. DBT
Yeah.
is a very, very opinionated product. And I love it. I'm like, I want to be told what to do as long as it works. I don't want to figure that out for myself. That's why they're there. They're there to solve a problem. And so I think Superhuman does that as well. We have a very strong opinion about how email should work. It's not for everyone, but when we focus on those problems that we've agreed we really care about, then we have a lot of permission to take really big swings and build something very new. So okay, so that's like the context. It's not the answer to your question. You're asking about kind of merging qualitative and quantitative. I think it does need to anchor to like what those kind of top line goals and company values about the product are, and then within that, what are the core hypotheses that you have about the problems users have? You need to start with the problems. I'm not a believer in starting with the solutions. I think that's a recipe for having an unsuccessful experience. So starting with the problems that you solve for the user, and then what are your hypotheses? Are those actually problems? And then what are the hypotheses about how we might solve them? And I think operating
Yeah.
within that framework, problem solution, allows you to then organize within the company around like, okay, I'm for example, within Superhuman, about a little over 9 months ago, we began launching generative AI features like everybody else. Hopefully better than everybody else, but you get the idea. And so the core problem there is that the hypothesis is that we want to give even more time back to our users and help them have a more delightful experience. So they need to do less work, and we can use this new technology as a tool, generative AI, in order to kind of get to the next level of doing that for our users. It's the same philosophy as pressing to delete all of your emails, right, or archive them, I should say, mark done, which I love. It's one of my favorites. It's like you're saving time, you're creating headspace for the user, you're giving them this moment of delight every day of hitting inbox zero. It's the same philosophy of like giving time back. It's a different tool and a different solution to do that. So then within that, so we have a pod focused on AI. So then the question is, what are the core hypotheses about how we can help users there? And so just to take an example, a couple months ago, we launched a product called Instant Reply, which is where when you receive an email in your inbox, in the background, we look at it, we look at the rest of your email history in that thread as well as in other threads, and we recommend 3 potential answers. They're little like buttons, or we call them chips at the bottom. And that way you get the email. You don't need to think about it too much. You click one, it drafts the email for you. You can just press send. And so operating within that problem space, then you can go the level deeper of like, how can we learn about these hypotheses? And at that point, to be honest, I don't really care whether you use qualitative or quantitative data in order to learn about those hypotheses. It's all just different tools for different jobs. I think the more ambiguity there is and the more like you're discovering the problem, qualitative is, I typically find, is more valuable. It's really hard to understand what problems people have with quant data because you can't get into their brain. But then validating the impact potential, kind of what share of users experience this problem, et cetera, quantitative is typically more valuable in my opinion.
So as the head of analytics, right? Like, could so how does the data team roll up? Like, are you spending a lot of time with Rahul, or do you have like your own autonomy to just go in and pick on, hey, here is like, because someone needs to set that alignment for the company where
Yeah.
everyone as an org knows that, okay, this is what we believe in. Who's doing that today? And uh, the reason I wanted to ask this was also because traditionally people think of data teams as, you have a bunch of analysts, there's a question or there is like a query that comes in, someone writes the SQL for it, connects the warehouses, you have a graph, that graph gets put on a dashboard and then someone is consuming it. Of course that's like the old school way of doing it, but uh, how's your data team structured today, and why is it like that? Like, because for you as a head of analytics, what really matters? Like, would you care about data being more accurate? Would you care about data being like very quickly available? Would you care about the fact that everyone at Superhuman has access to equal amount of data, can ask any question that they need? Like, is the democratization aspect of data important to you as a data leader? Or is it just the fact that, hey, I want a solution which is proactive? It comes and tells me, Chris, go look here. This is what's happening, right? Like, just trying to understand your psychology and, of course, how you deliver what you deliver.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. I think the last question you asked is like, what do I care about, is probably a good place to start. So for me, my goal is to create impact for the company. The heuristic I have is maybe like a cheeky one for the analytics
Yeah.
team, which is if we were able to do an A/B test where the control is there's no analytics team at all, we fire everybody. That's a little extreme. Let's assume we never hired
Yeah.
anybody, including me. And then the treatment is we do have an analytics team. I really want the world to be different.
Hmm.
And like, you can build all the dashboards you want. I don't think that ensures that the company is more successful.
Of course.
People have more access to data. They're making better decisions. We're building better data products because we also build products based on data here. I don't care about any of that. I want to, use my skills. I think of myself more as like a general executive, and I'm specialized in data, but I'm not like a data person who's, who's doing data for the sake of data. I love it because it helps companies grow. So that's my goal, is to have that A/B test be successful, and that's also the thing I hold myself accountable for. If I look over the course of a quarter, a reasonably long amount of time where we can make meaningful change, if we haven't changed the trajectory of the company, at least in a small way, I think we've certainly failed.
Yeah.
And so that's my goal overall. The way we work is, so Superhuman has an executive team, including Rahul, and we're all kind of have ownership over our own areas. So marketing, sales, you can imagine, product engineering. We have very tight alignment on like what the company strategy is. And to me, strategy is like, define your goal, agree that the goal would be a good outcome, define the key focus areas that will allow you to reach that goal. And then after that, everybody can do all their own stuff, like, and they don't really need much oversight unless they're not hitting their targets in order to help the company reach that goal. So it's much more of like
Yeah.
I would say like a flat executive team. There's not a lot of Rahul's telling engineering what to do, telling product, telling analytics, telling marketing, telling anything. He's out there doing podcasts and working with customers and assimilating that information and doing large sales and providing input. But we don't have a top-down culture like that. It's much more like
So
of a
I,
shared
I,
ownership.
I have a question here. So let's say you launch a new feature today. And of course, when a new feature launches, I'm assuming that everyone in the company is rallying behind measuring how it's going to go. There's a lot of excitement in general
Yeah.
about how the product or that particular feature is going to do. And then, of course, you have the overall Superhuman product umbrella, wherein after a month or 2 months or maybe a quarter or 6 months, it's going to essentially become a part of the bigger umbrella, wherein it's just another feature in the suite of 100 features. Is there like a phase where you are more proactively analyzing stuff and then you casually pass it, let's say, to the product team for them to take care of everything?
Yeah.
Or does that like happen that the product team and data team, yeah, like how do you do that?
Yeah, so the way the analytics team is structured is we have a central team, and then we follow a hub and spoke model. So we have data scientists who embed in each core product area. And my definition of embed is you spend at least 80% of your time there. So they're really almost more a member of the product pod. Like, product engineering design, rather than a member of the analytics team. And they're in there, they're in the, they're in the stand-ups every day, they're in the retros, they're collaborating as a thought partner with the product managers. And so when a launch is planned for like a month from now, before the launch, we need to define what are our goals for the launch, like what are we trying to accomplish qualitatively, what are the metrics that will proxy for whether we've been successful at that, because we need to hold ourselves accountable. How will we measure it? What's the events that we need, et cetera? And that's a direct collaboration between the data scientist and the product manager. The product manager is organizing the pod to do that, but the data scientist is accountable for that happening. If it doesn't happen, it's on the data scientist. And ultimately, it's on me. And then when
Yeah.
launch happens, you have a very clear roadmap of, okay, cool, here's what we expect. Here's when we're going to learn it. Here's the phase gates for understanding whether this was successful and understanding what we're going to learn from it. And then this is this is the next phase if it is successful.
So, Chris, there's a lot of AI coming into even the analytics space, right? Like everyone
Yeah.
is launching what seems to be exciting. It of course breaks in a lot of scenarios because I think everyone is still in very early stages of like having a reliable AI for data analysis. Our product itself, Crunchit.ai, we're working with enterprises, good companies, good logos, but they move very slow and for good reasons, for the right reasons, because there's like a lot of concern in general around, hey, can it scale? Can we test it more? Could we also do this? Could we also do that? But one thing that's being established is that we're moving towards an automated world, or you will see lesser and lesser human beings continue in the role of a data analyst or a business analyst. And I believe data science roles are also at the risk of being replaced by AI sooner or later. Like you'll always have some people who can write patents and do exceptional work, but that's like the top of the top. Rest of the folks would get impacted by it. So as these data teams are getting smaller and smaller, and everyone wants to focus on bottom line profitability, right? Like so, how do you decide what to keep working on and what to cut? Like because there's a lot of resource constraint, a lot of things happening, and there's immense pressure. AI could backfire as well if it's inaccurate. How do you handle that? How do you decide what to work on and what to cut?
Yeah, I think I mean for me the challenge I typically give when building like a roadmap or just doing a weekly prioritization or something like that, um, of projects is like each project needs to kind of like fight for its place on the roadmap. Like the default is we're not going to work on it. We should be working on the top 5% or maybe 10%, not more than 10% of things that come up, to allow us to move faster and go deeper on the things that are most meaningful. And I do think it ties back to what I was saying before about kind of the A/B test of analytics teams. Is like the question I ask myself is kind of the inversion question. If you're familiar with that framework, is like, what bad happens in the world if we don't do this? It would surprise you how many projects the answer to that question is nothing. So in those ones, like we don't do, even if it sounds nice or I'm interested or I'm curious, we don't do it. We need to see like what's the question that it answers, what impact does it provide, either like a way to learn about customers that we could act on and where we're reasonably confident we're going to find something that again, I guess I'm restating it, that would be actionable. And then even if it is actionable, the team that would act on it, because the thing about data teams often is like we don't actually have any guns, we don't build the product, we don't do email marketing, and so like we need to be deeply cross-functional in order to have our work have impact. It's not enough to make recommendations, and you need to like have that partnership where it's getting acted on, and ideally that's seen as like we're giving the gift of insight or like not gift because that makes it sound like we're doing a favor. We're not, but we're giving insights to help marketing team, product team, et cetera, kind of do even more impactful work. And when you build that flywheel, it's super, super powerful because then, as you become more proactive, you're pulled into those conversations. They need you there rather than trying to fight your way into the room. And so I think focusing on those things that have a clear path to having an impact on the company, again, laddering up to like the company goals that we've agreed on in the executive team is really important. That's the kind of the first class of things. And then I think there's a minority of the team's energy in general at most teams that I've worked on that are building better tools, building better platforms, investing in analytics engineering, thinking more like a product team, where the product you're building is data, and the users of the product are yourself and other people in the company. And the question to answer is, how can we make it easier to make great decisions, to use data more effectively and faster, so that first class of projects, the projects that are immediately impactful, can happen faster, and you can deliver more of them. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah,
but the kind of culture you're talking about, right? Like that's not easy to create,
yeah,
wherein everyone is so aligned. At Superhuman, like is everyone consuming data and how are they consuming data? Because sometimes data is not easy to consume. It is actually, it may be in a warehouse, maybe you have Mixpanel or something like that, your internal tracking for product analytics. That's one aspect of it. There are these new signups, marketing data, that's the second aspect of it. There's maybe a customer care data, but I'm sure there is also a warehouse that you have at some place recording all of the raw forms where you need to essentially do some engineering. You need to
Yeah.
like write line of code to extract some insight. Does everyone do that internally?
No, not everyone does. There's probably about a third of people in the company, kind of setting the analytics team aside, who who are pretty good at SQL and can answer kind of simpler
But
factual
then
questions.
how have you built this culture then where everyone is so aligned? Because I think there's a lot to learn for companies out there here,
I see.
wherein, yeah,
Yeah, I think it's mostly a cultural exercise. I don't actually think it's a technical exercise of like getting access to data. I think it's, if you have an executive team that's, let's call it 8 people, for a company of superhuman size, it's hard to get on the same page about like what are the outcomes we're trying to accomplish, like what are the kind of metrics that proxy for that, and what are the big bets, like what are the 2 to 4 things maximum that we're going to do that will allow us to reach those goals, because it means deprioritizing probably 15 other ideas that people on the executive team had, and that's really it hurts. And so I think that does need to come from the very top, so from Rahul and then from our chief operating officer, who I report into, by the way. It really needs to come from psychological safety of being able to disagree in public and have that be okay and have it not be personal, and um, getting full alignment, like at the top, about what the goals are and how we're going to accomplish that, and making sure we have kind of enthusiastic participation of like, hey, if anybody disagrees, I really want to hear it and I really want to talk about that because I care about your opinion. You're in the room for a reason, and I want to get to the point either where we agree or whether we disagree and commit. But those are the only 2 options in my mind. If there's any dissension, then you're going to have a team off on their own doing something different because they don't agree about the goal. I think agreeing about the goal, it takes energy and time and focus, and it takes the right hiring too. Like, you need to hire people who want to participate in that culture. Some people are in it
yeah.
for their own glory, and that's okay. It's just not okay here.
Chris, so this the second question that I'm gonna follow up with is, it, I think you brought this up, and I loved how you phrased it when we were planning the episode. You went on to say that everyone wants to be proactive, but
Mm,
if someone is asking you to be proactive, you're already probably reactive, right?
yeah,
Like, and I love that. That's so true. So from being someone who is getting a query and you're like basically servicing it, a service desk of sorts, to being actually how you phrased it as a value driver or being proactive, helping people take the right decisions. How do you position an entire team to do that,
yeah,
or how you plan on doing it further ahead?
yeah. No, that, I mean, it's topical because that's like what I'm working on right now. What has worked for me is ruthlessly focusing on the things that are valuable for the business, and I think part of what that means is that it's a bit of like a, like a false goal to say your goal is to be proactive. In the same way, it's kind of a false goal to say your goal is to get promoted. Or your goal is, as a company, maybe, is to like make a lot of revenue. I think if any of those is your goal, you're kind of already lost. Those are the things that happen when you provide value to the company, not the other way around. So when I,
Yeah,
in order to make a ton of revenue, you need to have a scalable business model, where when you build a great user experience, people will pay for it in a way that supports your business, which is my definition of product market fit, by the way. And then the revenue will come as exhaust. But if your goal is to scrounge around for revenue in the dirt, you're not going to get there. And I think the same thing
yeah,
goes for being proactive. Is like, if you ruthlessly, if your kind of company, excuse me, if your team currency is like, we're really responsive and it's a good experience to work with us, and we get back to you quickly and we always answer your question and build dashboards, then like you can accomplish that and still not have a lot of impact. But if your team currency, like the way you feel like you're successful, is a direct impact on the company, then you must be proactive in order to accomplish that. And the reason for that is like kind
yeah,
of a philosophy that I have, that it's my opinion. I mean, all this is my opinion, which is that when analytics teams and data science teams are partnering with the business, the mindset I try to take is like a product management mindset. Is this the person you're partnering with, your stakeholder, should be the expert about the problem, but you need to be the expert about the solution. It's the same thing as like the
yeah,
product death spiral. If you've read that article, is like, hey, if you just build all the features your
yeah,
customers ask for, then you're kind of screwed. It's the same thing. Like, and so for us, like, it needs to start with empathy. Is like,
yeah,
go out, interview your stakeholders, say like, what do you look at with your coffee in the morning? What are the decisions you want to make that you're blocked on? What has been your, what I do when I started a new company, because I just did, when I started at a new company, I say like, tell me about your experience working with data teams at other companies. What worked well, what didn't work well. It's a user interview. And if you do 10 of those in one week, which you can, they're only like half an hour, you really begin to see themes and think like, well, it sounds like you're saying like you need this tool, you need that tool. I have an understanding of the technical landscape and of the tooling landscape. I can propose something that might solve that problem that you never would have thought of. And
yeah.
I think that motion positions you as a thought partner. And I have always seen it provide more value to the company, and it delivers trust, because you're just listening. You're not like trying to assert your own opinion. Start with the stakeholders' problems and just solve that problem and see where it gets you.
Yeah. So we're talking about stakeholder problems. Just now you mentioned tooling, and this point was also brought to like our conversation by you when we were again planning the episode. But I love how even the answer to the very first question that I started this podcast with, you went on and said that, hey, DBT is very opinionated and I love DBT,
Yeah.
right? Like as long as it works. But so let me set some context for people probably who are not familiar with DBT here in the audience. But uh, essentially at Crunch as well, when we were trying to get AI to do analytics and like behave like an analyst, when you go in and say, hey, what is my revenue like? A revenue could have multiple definitions. The CRO looks at revenue in a different way. The CFO looks at the revenue in a different way. And unfortunately, both of them call it revenue. So there's a human being who's mapping all of that, ideally in an organization, who's mapping all the logic behind, okay, here is how the revenue for a CFO needs to be. And this is what gets classified as a semantic layer. Now, our belief when we started building this at Crunch was that, okay, we are going to need a semantic layer because how else would the AI agent, which is not a human being, know that, okay, when Chris is asking, here is the revenue, and Vikram is asking, here is the revenue. And that got me thinking that if AI is actually going to go to that stage where you will see more and more analysts leaning in on machines to do data science work, you'd probably need a lot of semantic layer built in everywhere. Up until now, semantic layer was a point of luxury. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, as a company, we have control over our data structures, right? Like you're mapping raw data to business term. It's something you do when you have a lot of free time, which is why even some of the big companies don't have a semantic layer.
Yeah.
But
We don't
I
have one,
don't
by the way.
see that.
Um,
Yeah, and I don't blame you. Like I can totally see how that happens uh, as you go through a lot of stuff. And then there are some really interesting ways in which people have tackled it. I'm sure you have some way of handling how the raw data gets mapped to the business term,
yeah.
or like something that is working for you just for now.
Yeah.
But if AI is actually gonna become the de facto mode, like companies like DBT should be blowing up. And I remember you chatting about DBT labs and like the SQL mesh and a whole bunch of these new age tools that are coming in. I just want to hear your thoughts on how do you see the whole space evolving? Like, do you see there's a very bright future? Do you see these tools being more no code? Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I don't see them being no code. I think
Mhm.
my my opinion is that um, code is the correct and best abstraction for data transformations. Period. Um, so I don't see them
Yeah,
being
of
no
course.
code. Um, I mean, tools exist that are no code that work for some problems to solve, for sure.
Yeah.
I just think I struggle to imagine a world where there aren't coded tools um, for the majority of use cases. And then your first question was like kind of where is it going? I don't have a great answer. I
Yeah,
think
or
go.
in general, with like the enterprise grade semantic layer,
Oh, I see.
what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on tools like DBT and SQL mesh? Yeah.
I think the introduction of DBT like absolutely revolutionized kind of centralizing data transformations, giving data analysts powerful tools that help them act more like software engineers and also help them like get the taste of building things that are durable in a framework that can scale and that has the right abstractions, which I think is the way that DBT is really opinionated, like freshness and testing and things that are configurable. I think those are really beautiful abstractions that people really enjoy using and feel like magic. I think that has been an amazing foundation. And then I think the question here is, or a potential challenge is how do you scale that? Um, at my last company, Updater, the business model was much more broad. It was more horizontally broad than Superhuman. Superhuman is very focused, and which I think is great. It also means at my last company we had many more DBT models than we have here at Superhuman, which I don't necessarily think is good. Like I think fewer simplicity is good. But anyway, we had over 1,000 models, and it's hard to like keep track of them. I think DBT Cloud just got column level lineage. I forget when it was, like maybe a
Yeah.
month or two ago, and that was
Yeah.
from SQL Mesh, the open source tool that's maintained by Tobacco Data. So I think that's really powerful. So you can like if you change a column, like what are the downstream implications? You can test that without needing to actually run the model. You can test it logically in the code, and just by compiling it. I think companies are finding it challenging to scale something like DBT because it gets so big and it's almost too easy to build new models. And it maybe they need to be, or a tool that will be successful needs to be more opinionated about how you go from 100 to 500 to 1,000 to 10,000 models while still like keeping your sanity.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, so how do you as an individual keep yourself, let's say, sane in this world where there's so much happening on the data front? And I'm right in the middle of all of it. Like
Hmm.
every day I go out, there's a new tool popping up,
Yeah.
looks promising in the first cut. But you would not see all of these tools growing, right? Like, and it's
Yeah.
like we have a lot of aspiring founders here who are listening in today, who are
Yeah.
building data products. And to them, what would you say? Like, if someone is approaching the whole domain of data, what is that one problem that's still largely unsolved? Because there is an unsolved problem.
Yeah,
It's not like
sure.
everyone in the world has solved everything, but
No.
then there are these incumbents like the Tableaus and Power BIs and ThoughtSpots of the world, and then like Hex is growing up pretty well. And uh, in the product analytics side, you have Mixpanel and Amplitudes of the world, a couple of OG players, Alteryx, which is almost like 20-25 years
Yeah.
now. Uh, so there is a lot of good products, and there's still, I don't think we have like even covered or served 10% of what needs to be served as a market. Uh, which is why you are seeing so many people build, but not everyone is growing. Like, a lot of them are struggling. What is your message to them? Like, what is an ideal product in your view, or what is that one problem that people should still be spending time on?
I mean, there's plenty of them, and it really depends. I think there's kind of a class of problems. I don't know if it's two problems or one problem. You could spend 6 months just answering that question, like what's the problem, which is what I was saying before. There's a class of problems that I think are somewhat interesting, which try to frame the question being asked, not just like answer it. Like a Looker or a Tableau or whatever is like, okay, I have a question, I know the report I want to build, then the tool helps you build the report. But there's a class of problems that are like, okay, how can we provide a mental model for the user of like how the business works? A lot of businesses, they don't, if you did like a heuristic where you asked everyone in the company separately, how does our business work? Like, give me 5 bullets. Like, what is our business? How do we make money? And what are the drivers of that? Like, you would get dramatically different answers. Probably how we make money would be, you would probably get the right answer from most people, like 80%, hopefully. But like, how does it break out? How much of our revenue, Superhuman, we have self-serve sign up, and then we're beginning to sell on annual contracts. I think like an area where I need to improve personally is I don't think most people in the company outside the exec team and the sales team know how much of our revenue comes from sales versus self-serve sign up. And so like, that's my job, is to make sure that people can answer that question. So I think there's a class of tools. One is Levers Labs, and then one is Starburst Data. They're trying to help people frame their questions and like look in the right place. I think data is potentially more powerful to identify which problems to solve in the business, like where the funnel drop off is biggest, for example. That's more the like generative, like producing hypotheses, as opposed to evaluating hypotheses, which I think is the typical domain of data. Is like, hey, I want to understand, which of our who our top users are. Like, that's our evaluative rather than generative. So those are things that are interesting. Is like having a stronger opinion about what the business model is and what questions should be asked and how they should be framed. I think that is arguably harder than answering the questions with data.
Yeah, no, I agree to that. So are you essentially saying that there's still a dearth of tools that help you inquire the right way, as in like people struggle with asking the right questions itself? And this question is particularly relevant because
Yeah,
there's a lot of NLP layers coming out. It's like, hey, type the question in English
yeah,
and you will get the graph or something like that. But the problem is people only type what they know.
yeah,
And if they don't know how
exactly.
to ask a question,
Yeah, I
like,
agree.
so are you pointing to that?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I would say that a problem in most businesses that I've observed is that it would be impactful to ask more impactful questions and to be able to frame them in a way where they have a path, like they have the potential to be answered and acted on by data. The counterpoint to that is like questions of like, hey, I'm curious about this, I'm curious about that. Nothing against curiosity, but when you answer a question with data, you're consuming resources that could go to something else. And I really want every question to be actionable.
Which tool do you spend a lot of time in, Chris, on a day-to-day basis?
We're a Metabase customer here. We've been using Metabase for quite a long time because it's open source and free. We may move off that at some point, but we've had it. I don't know how many years. I've only been here for 3 months. We've had it for a couple of years at least, probably 5 years.
Yeah, Metabase is very powerful. And we have used Metabase ourselves in the
Oh,
past
nice.
across companies as well. Very, very interesting. And there's like a lot of new promising work that's also being done around, hey, could we have a LLM model that better understands the world of data science or the world of data domain? And
Sure.
I think like the tools that are really going to crack this are the ones that would be very verticalized, as in like you become a tool that is very specific to a niche. And I know of a company called Flyer,
Hmm.
FLYR. A friend of mine works there, and they do only airline-based analysis, right? Like, so
Interesting.
airline pricing, airline ticketing, airline this, and they're 100 million plus revenue, I think,
Wow.
or somewhere around that. And most people don't look at them because you just don't know. And the kind of
Well,
insights this
if they're
company
doing
is
100
giving them,
million in
like it
revenue,
will blow
someone's using
you.
them. So good for them.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's so good because I was looking at the kind of answers that they serve, and it's also things like, hey, you know what? Take the plane from New York to San Francisco empty because you have enough cargo. So if you don't like fill the 10 seats and you load the cargo, essentially the unit economics is going to work in your favor.
Hmm.
That is a kind of insight you can't like come to unless you're working specifically for an industry.
Yeah.
And I think that is a second thing which I keep telling myself, that okay, we need to like as narrower as you can go, the better you would serve. But I know we are coming to like close and towards the end of everything. Chris, I want to ask two questions to you. One is, of course, any learning that you have had which you would like to share with our audience. But before you answer that, of course, Superhuman is a name that a lot of people admire. And I know we talked about this before we had an issue with our recording, but I want to bring that question back up. How central is, let's say, data, and how are decisions, like what has made Superhuman? What would you say are the three or the two biggest things that Superhuman has been able to unlock for itself? Uh, and of course, after that, any learning that you'd like to share with the audience.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the main thing that stands out to me about like the I don't know drivers of success for Superhuman. I mean, there's many things. There's no way to encapsulate it in just a few bullets. But the thing that comes to mind for me that really stands out is from Rahul, which is the relentless focus on the customer. I think we have kind of an explicit set of values that we aspire to embody at Superhuman. The top one certainly is customer delight, and we're very much a kind of a design user experience holistically driven culture. We're driven by data less than by design, and I think that's good. I think that makes the product amazing, and so that really kind of seeps its way into practically all the decisions that we make. When we're contemplating a decision, the question is almost always, what is the customer first reason for this decision? And if there isn't one, then we probably shouldn't do it. And I think you see that in Rahul's responding over email to customer complaint tickets. Rahul's on Twitter looking at people offering feedback suggestions. It's obsessive. And I think that's amazing. And that's like the correct paradigm for a founder. And that's a lot of kind of how we've gotten here. And he set the tone, and we're all following it. I think that's wonderful. And so,
Yeah, big fan of Superhuman's onboarding. I got into Superhuman because I ended up chatting with Rahul, and he responded to me when I was a nobody. I reached out with a random feedback saying, "Oh, I don't like the design." That was the designer in me saying it's looking very faded out. And I think I may have the screenshot as well in my chat with him.
oh, nice.
And he responded back, and but there was no looking back. Like what got me in was that, okay, here is someone who you have been reading about. You of course read the wait list, how Superhuman created that,
Yeah.
the PMF article that came out, which
Yep.
is again a masterpiece. And thereafter, you shoot a random message to him, and he responds back to you when you're least expecting it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give this tool a shot. And
Glad to hear
I think
that.
it's been 6 years, 7 years, no looking back. But
Nice.
super glad I did that. Thank you so much for everything you do. Any closing thoughts, Chris? Like, what are some of the learnings? Anything that you would like to leave the audience with?
Learnings. I mean, I think as I've kind of been working in data longer and longer, the thing that I try to come back to is trying to have like a partnership and empathy with your stakeholders. I think as data people, I think I mentioned before, like we don't really have any guns. Like we don't build the product ourselves unless you have a company that is a data product. And we don't do customer engagement, we don't do marketing, emails, etc. So you can produce the best insights, but if they don't get acted on, it's not meaningful in my opinion. And so having empathy for your stakeholders and thinking about everything as a partnership, and they often have better ideas than you do, especially in my opinion about like what questions to ask of the data. Start bringing stakeholders in from the beginning, helping them feel heard, helping them feel like it's a partnership. I think frankly in the data industry the bar is low for this. Like
Yeah.
people have poor experiences with data teams sometimes, where they're not listened to, or their stuff doesn't get prioritized. And I think use that as an advantage. Like give them a great experience as your customer. My heuristic is like when someone leaves a meeting with me, like I want them to feel good. Like keep it light. And I think that has
Yeah.
really helped us do more impactful work.
Yeah, I love that. And it's something that I usually compile into like a sequence of here is one of the best learnings that I have had from the episode. So when that comes out, uh, I think this is going to be one of like a very different answer, but something that I very strongly relate to. So thank you so much for sharing this, Chris. You've been very patient. We had a mild hiccup when we were starting up, and I'm glad we were able to sort it out.
Oh yeah, no worries.
This was super fun. I still have, like, I can see the list of things that I wanted to talk about, and there's
Yeah,
so much that I've not been able to cover, but it's okay. I really enjoyed our chat. Thank you so much,
thanks for having me on.
Chris.
This was great. Yeah, appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Bye.